Scientology's harmful disconnection practice destroys families. And today we're going to be chatting with Liz Gale and learn the story of how Scientology destroyed her family, but that did not stop her.
Hip hip hooray!
Hey, everybody, and welcome. I'm Natalie, and this is Scientology Life After a Cult. Thank you, everybody, for being here in the live chat. Hello to the members. I see you there. And thank you so much to the moderators for being here and helping out. I'm so excited to talk to Liz Gale. I feel like it's been a while since we've done a video together. Let me bring her up here on the screen. Hello, Liz. Welcome.
Hi. Hi, everybody.
Hey, everybody. I'm so excited to chat with you, which often it's interesting because I get I'm so excited to talk to you, but at the same time, it's such a devastating story, but it has it has a happy ending, but there's not an ending yet, if that makes sense. Where we're going to talk about kind of your family history in Scientology, because you were a third generation Scientologist, but I've only known you obviously since you left Scientology. And as I've gotten to know you, I've been really just impressed with so many things. You've written a book, right? Confessions of a Scientology Pothead. You're raising a family. You're here on YouTube. We'll share a link to Liz's channel. I'll pull that up in just a little bit. And I thought it'd be great when we were chatting to sit down and kind of talk a little bit about that background, and more importantly, how you turned it around. And I think that is probably what I find so inspiring, is how you went on to create your own family from what was a broken family because of Scientology and disconnection. Can you start back kind of at the beginning? Because I know a lot of you know Liz's story, but I feel like a lot of you don't, and you really need to hear it, because I think she's in such a unique position, having so many members of her family for so long in Scientology. So tell us about it, because it started with your grandmother.
Yes. Okay. So before Scientology, there was Dianetics. There was the book. And for a few years there were pretty hardcore Dianeticists. And my grandmother was one of them. My mom was born sort of later in my grandma's life. So by the time my mom was born, my grandma was all in. So I'm in the sort of unique, I suppose, tragically unique position where it's like a maternal pass down, right? Like my grandmother to my mother to me. And so I don't know, there's something about that generational, like raising other people, where it's deeply, deeply embedded in how I was raised and how she was raised.
There wouldn't even be a question about it. When I think about when my mom got into Scientology when I was 5, and then I was raised in Scientology from there and left when I was 40. With your grandmother in Dianetics from the beginning, and your mother was completely raised in Scientology. I mean, as were you. What do you think the difference was? And, and it's okay if you don't know, but between you being raised in Scientology and you breaking free, and your mom being raised in Scientology, but still remaining a Scientologist?
Oh, yeah. That's a question I've thought about a lot. I mean, not to throw my mom under the bus here, but education. My mother is a very smart lady in so many respects. But in formal education, she graduated 8th grade. I did have the luxury, I suppose you'd say, of starting community college, then going on, like getting some education outside of the Scientology thought bubble, which gave me, even just access to the thoughts about mental health. Just the concepts of that were so different than anything I'd ever been exposed to.
Yeah.
And it changes your mindset. It expands your view. For me, enough.
Do you think that Do you think that technology played a role at all with the access that we have now to the internet and finding out about Scientology and connecting with other people outside of Scientology? Because I think about that often of
Mhm.
people, especially people who had parents who were also in Scientology, where the information was so limited to,
Mhm.
you can't just go online and get information and then read it. You actually would have had to have met with people. Did your mom ever talk about people leaving Scientology? Do you recall when you were growing up and it being a problem or knowing people who left?
Oh, yeah, yeah. My first godparents, they ended up leaving Scientology, so around, 5, 6, they were gone, and I had new godparents, the Feshbacks, Matt and Kathy Feshback, who are, like, big time Scientology
Mhm.
people. Um, yeah, so there were definitely people along the way because my mom's entire friend base is in Scientology. So if anybody left Scientology, her old business partner left, and was declared suppressive, so she was out. Yeah, it happens.
Yeah, that's so interesting because people left Scientology around your mom and she stayed a Scientologist. Was
Mhm.
it when you talk about going to school, was that something that your mom or your parents encouraged, or is that something that you did on your own, like when you decided to go to community college?
I was in a little bit of a glitch. I graduated high school at 14. Um,
Oh.
Graduated high school. I went to the Delphine Academy in Oregon for 8 years old, pretty much till 14.
Mhm.
And there you do have it's a boarding school and you are like doing class all day. It's very involved. Compare that to, the GED.
Wait, it was a boarding school then? So you were in the boarding school from the time you were 8?
Yeah.
I did not know this.
Yeah, I had a year off-ish in between, like, 9 and 10. I had about a year off because when I was sent at 8 years old, which is when my brother was also sent, I couldn't handle it. I mean, I couldn't do it. I cried
Yeah.
all the time, I got into trouble, I couldn't, like, manage my diet.
Mm.
I mean, I have a 10-year-old, he would not survive. I laugh, but yeah, I don't
Yeah,
know
well,
why
what
I'm
was that
laughing.
like at such a young age? I mean, you're gone, you're boarding school, so you're staying in a dorm, like, what does it look like? What is
Yeah.
kind of a what does, like, a day look like when you're at Scientology boarding school?
Well, a typical day for me looked like, yeah, waking up in the dorms. Actually, I'm finding out a lot of it is similar to the Sea Org. So we would wake up, we would have our room check. So we would earn points throughout the week for doing things wrong. If we didn't pass our room check, if we were tardy, we got 2 points. If we were absent more than 15 minutes late, you get 4 points. If you accumulate 4 points in a week, you are restricted. So it's a lot of just like getting up, going to the next place, eating in the hour or half hour you have to eat, going to the next place, and just constantly like trying not to be late for roll call or muster. Um, and it's a very rigorous school. It's sad actually because I only live about 40 minutes away from this school now, and it would be such a great place for our community. But um, the study tech and L. Ron Hubbard technology is embedded in it so deeply that there's no way to
Yeah.
experience it without being indoctrinated. But yeah, just a lot of statistics, a lot of conditions, a lot of OWs,
Wow.
which is writing up my crimes.
Would you stay there 7 days a week, or would you just go to school
Oh
Monday through
yeah,
Friday and then
yeah.
go home?
Yeah, I mean, my parents lived in Utah, and I was sent to Oregon, and
At
then yeah.
8?
Mhm. And
Whoa.
then during that time, as if it wasn't, like, hard enough, at one time, my mom called me when I was there, and I had left Utah, and then she said, "We're moving." So I left Utah, and when I flew home, because you go home for, Christmas break and spring break and summer, I went to a totally new town, new place, never been before. So ever since 8, I didn't have a home after that. I actually didn't live with my parents. I mean, I guess I lived a full year-ish, 9 to 10, but after that, I never lived a full year in my parents' house ever again.
Wow, so you're just there going to school, going to boarding school. Your
Mhm.
brother was there with you for part of the time?
Yeah, so my brother is 4 years older than me. My brother was very, very smart, and a lot of exceptions were made for him to attend this boarding school because my parents were close with the headmasters. Um, I've talked about this a little bit before. This might be too much for everybody.
Yeah, no, I think, there's so many new people to our channels and to this. I
Yeah.
think, and there's so many stories. I think if you're okay with it to,
Okay.
share
Okay.
what you want about it kind of with the timeline, because it's
Yeah.
such also an important part of your story and what happened to your family.
Yeah. Well, and I didn't find this out till later. But my brother, when he was young, when he was about 4, he broke his arm. And when the perception was after the bone was set, he had an engram, a Scientology engram. So this is something negative in his subconscious that was stored in a time of pain and unconsciousness that would later be triggered negatively to his health and his behavior. And the trigger that ended up happening was he started throwing tantrums. He was unhappy. I mean, come on, put a 4-year-old in a cast and break
Mhm.
it, they throw tantrums. They're cranky. That's age appropriate. But the perception was that the engram was being re-stimulated, triggered, and the common denominator was my mother. And so I don't know if she came to this conclusion or somebody else came to this conclusion, but um essentially it was decided that she was triggering him, and so at the earliest possible age he could go to boarding school. 4 years later he was sent
To boarding
um,
school at Delphi.
to a Scientology boarding school. Reading between the lines there is essentially because that's better for him. Now, I've done some research into Dianetics
Mhm.
since then, and there's a lot about this, about mothers re-stimulating children, and how about the mother is the common denominator, and that if your child is re-stimulated, the best thing to do is sort of break ties with that mother to remove them into a safe environment, keep them, calm and not re-stimulated until they're 8 years old, and you can really crack down on their case by applying Scientology. So that's my that's his sort of origin story, right?
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
laughing. It's very sad. I have mixed emotions. Just bear with me.
No, I totally get it.
Thank
So
you.
you're there
Oh,
from 8 to 14. What was it like being in a boarding school, Scientology boarding school at Delphi, and going through things like puberty? And I mean, was that part of where they educated you about like getting a period and things like that? I'm just thinking, not having your parents around, where usually you would hear that, from your mom, have a conversation. Can you recall at all what that was like from that aspect? Because people, you hear people going off to boarding schools, but it's in my mind is something that people used to do. And for it to be when you were young, because you're much younger than I am, that's like not that long ago. It seems to be, still doing that, but they do. But when you were there at that age, 12, 13, 14, can you recall what that was like in terms of being a young girl, and your body's going through changes? How did they approach that with kids?
yeah. So you're assigned a staff member, like depending on what level you're at. I was in middle school at the time, so I was assigned a parent teacher. So this woman was, I guess, my go-to. Yeah, I got my period for the first time in the dorms. She was the person who was sort of tasked with explaining how to do stuff. Um, yeah, she taught me how to shave my legs,
Mm.
because I called home and like wrote a CSW.
And a
to start.
CSW, for those who don't know, is a completed staff work. It's basically when you need to ask permission in Scientology. Let's see if I can remember it. First, you say what the situation is.
Yeah, what is it? Gosh, why can't I remember it now?
Situation,
Situation,
something.
solution. The end is the
Yeah,
solution.
situation
And
and
so I
solution.
basically was like, here's the situation. I'm 12. I'm ready to shave my legs. I'm mature. Data. That's what it is. Data. I can buy razors in town for 44 cents, blah, blah, blah. Solution. Approve my request to shave my legs. And then my mom would
And
be like,
who
approved.
so you sent that home to your mom to ask permission to shave your legs?
Yes.
So did you have to do it by mail, being that your family was living in Utah? Or were
Yeah,
they
I
in
think
Utah?
so. I think so. Or no, I think I read it to her on the phone.
Mm, and
Yeah,
then
I
she
think
just approved.
yeah, I think I was able to read it to her on the phone. All kinds of things like that. go like by proxy. You know what I mean? This like sort of strange by proxy. There you go. Yep. Situation, data, solution, approve or disapprove.
Disapprove.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. It's so hard for me to wrap my head around that at such a
Mm-hmm.
young age to be in boarding school like that and in a Scientology environment. And you're right about the similarities with the Sea Org in terms of the room inspections.
Mm-hmm.
And we would get in ethics trouble or written up if we,
Mm-hmm.
violated that.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like same thing for you guys as young children. Did they have, when you were studying there, did they cover was it more like a traditional school in that you studied English, writing, arithmetic, all that stuff? What was it like?
No, they go by their own curriculum, and they have
Mhm.
their own curriculum company, Heron the bird, Heron, Heron Books, I believe it's called. It's a franchise now. So if you want to start one of these schools, they have a whole package of their curriculum. Everything is structured exactly like a Scientology course. You have check sheets and packs for everything that you're doing. Even if you're doing a math book, like you're going to do lessons out of a math book, traditional math book, you would have a pack and you would have a check sheet. So I know this might not make sense to a lot of people, but the point is it's exactly how you would study when you go to Scientology organization. You have your own dictionary and you have your own demo kit, which is another sort of required thing for the Hubbard's technology.
Mhm.
You were required to do their study technology courses as part of your curriculum. We were required to keep statistics, say like books had points for a reading system, and then we would apply conditions to our statistics. So depending on how our graph was going up or down, the angle at which it was, we would have certain steps that we had to apply, which were straight out of Scientology ethics book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So
then you were able to graduate at 14. Most places, I thought you had to be maybe it was you had to be 16 to drop out. When you graduated, what made it so that you could graduate from high school at 14? And I'm assuming they're an accredited school. Do you know?
they are, but I did not graduate from there. I
Okay.
got kicked out. I'm problematic.
It's
Just
why I like you.
in case you guys hadn't figured this. For Scientology, for conformity, I'm problematic. So actually what it finally was somebody asked me. They had I had graduated to, this is so insane. This is how I was so close to being made into a sociopath, I swear. They knew I was problematic, but my family had a lot of weight and my brother had graduated. So they didn't really want the bad PR, I think, of kicking me out just yet.
What
So
was
I
it
had
they
a
wanted to kick you out for?
well, I was I mean, I honestly was like petty theft. I was stealing change and candy from
Mhm.
anywhere I saw it. I don't know why. Um and I just never really stopped. And I would talk back. I mean, I screamed at one of the supervisors. Like I literally screamed F you, the whole thing in front of the whole group, like problematic. Also a little bit feral.
Mm,
Sorry. Like
yeah.
I'm better now, but it was rough. Anyway, I was going somewhere with this, but
Yeah, on if they were accredited, where you graduated high school
oh
from.
yeah, so I left and then I went to this place called Larry Dennison Academy in Hollywood, which was basically just a diploma mill. I took my GED test, I got my diploma, and that was the caveat. We moved to Oregon and I had to be enrolled in school until I was 16 years old.
Mm.
But I was 14 and I moved into the dorms at the community college an hour away from our ranch because I couldn't drive. I was too young to drive. So I got special permission to move into these college dorms.
At
I mean,
14.
I was 15 when I moved in to
Uh-huh.
them, but yeah. Uh it's a wonder I'm alive, guys. Woo! But that got me out of my parent, out of because then I had spent about 9 months living with my mom at that point. That got me back out, you know, for a whole bunch of other mistakes I could make and grow
Yeah, so
from.
you're living in dorms at a community college, you're 15
Mhm.
years old, and so how long do you do that for? And how did that work? Like, were your friends, I mean,
I
these kids
lied.
in
I
what, 18,
lied
19,
to
20?
everybody. I
What is
told the I told them when I moved in, everybody there. I told them when I moved in I was 17. And then my birthday's in November. So before I knew it, I was 18. And it worked pretty well for a while there. Some people never really found out how old I was until, years later, I went back to that town and we would be like, hey, meet me at the bar. I'm like, yeah, I can't go to the bar. And they're like, what? I'm like, I'm 18. And they're like, Liz, you've been 18 for 3 years. What is happening? I mean, to be honest with you, once I got out, pretty soon after that, I got a 24-year-old boyfriend who had his act together.
This was when you were at the college, living in the dorms and going to college?
Yeah. Lied to him too. So don't come after him. Poor guy.
So he thought you were 18. He was 24. Did your mom know about any of this?
Gosh, I don't know if she knew about that. She knew about my boyfriend and she knew how old I was, obviously, and she knew how old he was. I don't really know if we talked about the fact that I lied. Oh, actually we did, because I got an MIP, which is a minor in possession. And I smoked a cigarette. I smoked cigarettes, but I'm telling you, I was a hot mess. I smoked a cigarette in front of the officer and I gave the officer, I gave him a false birthday, actually. And he came back a couple days later and he pulled me aside and he had a very stern talk with me. And he told me how close I came to ruining my life. And he said, I don't know what's going on with you. I don't know why you're in this school. I don't know how you got here at 15. I don't know what your deal is, but this is your one golden ticket to get your shit together. And I took it.
Wow. So what happened after that?
I moved shortly after that. I moved to Eugene. I decided on a degree, which was early childhood education. And I moved to Eugene with that 24-year-old boyfriend. We got a place together. My mom signed special papers because I was 17 to move into this apartment with him. He found out at one point, way later, when I was pretty close to 18. And he was like, you're so lucky that I'm a nice guy. And I'm like, you're such a nice guy. But that was horrible of me to do. I'm laughing, but like, I can't imagine somebody doing that to my child. I was in a really tough spot and I honestly didn't really know what to do. And I didn't have a lot of skills or bright ideas to fix it.
Yeah, no, I mean, that totally makes sense. It's kind of like, what do you expect, right? You pretty much, it's like being on your own since you were 8 years old because you don't have parents there in that way or that family unit like that to grow up. I'm really curious about the experience of people who grew up in a boarding school that wasn't a Scientology school and just how similarly or different, they might be, especially when it came down to the rules about things. I was wondering, in Scientology, things can be so much more strict, I think. But I guess it depends on, what kind of a school that it is.
Yeah.
At what point did you start doing anything in Scientology yourself?
What do you mean? Like on my own
Like
accord?
doing courses? Did you
like
do
in my whole
Scientology?
life?
Yeah, outside of school, did you do any Scientology courses or auditing or training, or was it all through school?
Well, so my mom is a very highly trained auditor, and her entire goal for becoming an auditor was to audit the children she was going to have. So, in that regard, I have had Scientology practiced on me ever since. Like I would draw pictures with crayons in session.
Yeah.
So in that regard, and then I started at, I believe it was a mission. I want to say it was a mission. I did my success through communication when I was, gosh, I don't know. Yeah, very young, 6-ish, something like that. I did my first PRIF when I was 8. I think I did it again at 12. I think I did it again at 16. And then I think I started again at 19.
So you did the PURIF at 8. Where did you do it at?
Mace Kingsley, like in-home little center, which Mace Kingsley is a child auditing, child Scientology, like field office. It's its own business, but they've been practicing that way for forever. That was in Clearwater. We lived in Clearwater. All those people were very close with my mom.
Yeah, and then you go and the purification rundown, I mean, that's hours, 5 hours in a sauna, taking dangerous levels of niacin and vitamins. And you did this how many times?
Oh my gosh, I did it so many times. But the thing is that's the first step on the bridge.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So when I was going to do anything above those basic courses, it's just, oh, also, the culture generally of Scientology parents in my community growing up was to not use a lot of drugs, like Tylenol, barely ever. Like your arm
Yeah.
had to fall off, you get some Tylenol.
Yeah.
Um,
True.
Never had a surgery, never had a totally natural childbirth. So there really wasn't anything for me to purify.
But
But
why'd they have you do it so many times? How was it explained to you?
oh, I had to go back doing it typically just because there was something that I had like ingested or I had taken antibiotics. So I just had to do it again. Well, later I smoked cannabis. So
Mhm.
they were like, girl, you got to start over. And then at 19, I actually blew. I left my purif in the middle and I was like, listen, I've been here before. If this works perfectly, then I can go out, I can experiment with all the drugs I want, and I can come back and this purif will handle it. So here I go. And they were just like, you're insane. And I was like, yeah, bye. But they did take me back like 2 years later when I came back a crawling.
Mhm. So you did then went ahead and did what a lot of people do in their younger years and experiment with things, and then you returned to Scientology. Did they have you do the purification rundown again?
Yeah, the last time that I was there, I did it. I finished it up.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's interesting because they would have did they label you a drug revert, as they call it? But you can't really revert to drugs that you'd never done before.
Uh, well, so um, this is in my book a little bit too. I actually signed my Sea Org contract when I was 14, and in order to, my mom said that I couldn't go until I was 16, so I actively sought out LSD at that point when I was 14, specifically to take it to become ineligible for the Sea Org. So at 14, that's what I did. So that's what got me a purif again. And then later, I whatever was in college
Yeah.
and stuff.
And that, I have a friend or had a friend when I was in the Sea Org. She had left and blown, and while she was gone, she did LSD, so she would be
Mhm.
disqualified. Because for those who don't know,
Yep.
if you've ever done LSD, you cannot be in the Sea Organization.
Mhm.
And I've heard that a few times of young people who went and actually did LSD for what you just said, to disqualify themselves for the Sea Org, to not have to go through the
Mhm.
recruitment process because it can be just so intense and invasive.
Yeah. Well, and I'd already signed my contract. So
Mhm.
like they were coming for me. There was really not much I could do to get out of it. In fact, that didn't even totally get me out of it. Like it got me in some trouble that I hadn't foreseen would come after that. So then it was a spiral. Um it's hard for me to think about myself at that age, right? Like I have a child who's graduated high school this year, and I think back to when he was 14, and he's so much more street smart than I was because he didn't go to boarding school. Um, I'm just out there like with no parents, just actively sourcing something an illegal substance for the pure sense of I don't care what happens to me, I don't care where it comes from. I'm going to do this because I got to get out of this situation. That's extremely unsafe.
Yeah, I totally get it. I 100% get it. It's a desperation that
Mhm.
many go through in Scientology because you know what they're gonna make you do or what they want
Mhm.
you to do, and, if you're smart, you know what the qualifications are, and you quickly get yourself unqualified to be able to do that. I did it with other things. It
Mhm.
it just it really goes to show the desperation, I think, that people, especially children, because you were a
Mhm.
child, and
Mhm.
here you are at 14 wanting to avoid this billion-year contract and slave labor, and
Mhm.
so the solution is to go seek out LSD so as to not have to do it. I mean, just really the mindset there, it just blows my mind because, like I said, I've known a few people who felt that that's what they needed to do, and
Mhm.
some people have said, "Well, couldn't you just lie and said you did LSD?" But, I
That
mean,
never occurred to me. I
where
heard, who'd I hear say that, Aaron? Like somebody gave somebody some advice like that. And I thought, my goodness, I could have just made it up. I literally flew to California and like, yeah, just, oh yeah. You could lie,
Mhm.
but I'm not like that. I really wanted to burn that bridge. I don't know how
Yeah.
else to explain it. I wanted that door shut, and I was willing to take the heat. I was willing to take, um, but I didn't realize how bad it was going to get. That actually didn't get me out of it. I ended up attempting to unalive myself about 6 months after that.
In order
Um,
to avoid, were they still trying to recruit you for the Sea Org or just Scientology?
I forget what it was, but I think I was down the pipeline, was like a sec check, a whole thing, like it was this whole deal. And I don't know.
Yeah.
I couldn't do it.
Well, I'm glad
Oh,
that you did it.
thank you.
How did your mom respond to finding out that you had done LSD and knowing what that would mean in terms of not being able to be in the Sea Org?
You know, I don't think we ever talked about it.
She
I
just
think nope, it was a situation that I had to handle with the org. I had an ethics officer. It was not. I come to realize later in life this very bizarre relationship that with my mother, this strange dynamic where I was constantly in these situations that were like problematic for me, and she would swoop in and kind of be the hero. So she kind of like advocated for me with the ethics officer. But the whole reason I was even there in Scientology and in ethics was because of her putting me there anyway. Or like sometimes at Delphi I would get in trouble and I would call her and she would like call the ethics officer. I don't know, it's just this weird, so she was honestly my hero in some regards during that time, if that makes sense.
No, that totally makes sense. It completely makes sense. Phil brings up a good point. It's tough to lie in Scientology. The
Yeah.
conditioning is embedded deep, and there's the old e-meter thing, and that's true. We
Yeah.
grew up believing, I know I did, that the e-meter would know all, that you just have to tell the truth. It's just easier and faster because it's going to get pulled out of you.
Mhm.
And, some of the interrogations in Scientology are intense. And I know as a
Yeah.
young person, as a teen, when I did some of my first interrogations and security checks, you learn it's just easier to just tell them what it is because then you can make the interrogation stop
Yeah.
by being honest. But you get to the point, I think, growing up in Scientology with all of the indoctrination and desensitizing us to harm and
Mhm.
pain and conditioning so that for us we normalize that. We normalize abuse in ways because of the training routines.
Mhm.
I it blows my mind too, knowing, your mom grew up in Scientology, and like you're saying, she would advocate for you at times, which was kind of odd even for someone in Scientology because you would have been out ethics. But
Mhm.
she did do that.
Mhm.
And sometimes I wonder, and I don't know your mom or your family at all, but do you think that was this a situation of it was your mom was as much of a mother as she was capable of being? Or you know what I'm saying? Or do you think it was more of a malicious neglect? Because people who, depending on where they come from, my mother came from a very abusive household and not Scientology. She joined Scientology later, but it dictated kind of more like, what her future became and what she considered to be, normal or what she considered to be chaos. Do you think your mom, because of her Scientology upbringing, was just felt she was doing the best she could? Or, like I said, it's some people are just horrible parents.
Yeah, I'm going to give her the benefit of the doubt at least for the first half of my life. I genuinely believe that she honestly went above and beyond. Like she went out of her way to become an auditor so that she could audit her children and like bring that to her family, that worth, right? Because if you were going to pay for auditing for um I mean, she was a high auditor, and then I think they cut her level. Like I think she got to freaking, I want to say class 12. Like my mom is an achiever. Like she gets to the top. She did the first OT8 um so I think she was genuinely thought it was helping us a lot. But
When did
times
you decide to leave?
me?
Yeah.
I finally ultimately like was done after I had my first son. Yeah,
Mhm.
because there was just, I don't know, something about, well, it didn't help that my stepfather, literally, I'm like 7 weeks pregnant, just found out. And my stepdad and my mom said to me and my husband now, who's the boy's dad, your child will be a fourth generation Scientologist, whether you like it or not.
Whoa.
So I think at 7 weeks pregnant, I had like 2% of my mama bear going, and it just sort of grew and it just sort of grew. And then ultimately we had sort of a falling out about other stuff. And I don't know, it just, yeah, I don't know if that made sense. My
Oh,
20s.
it totally makes sense. Phil's asking, was your stepdad Jer or Jerry?
Dre, yes, that's
Ray?
my stepdad.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Tell what you know, Phil.
yes, Phil. Spill the tea,
Um,
Phil.
yeah, and my stepdad is old school too, right? My biological father died when I was 12. And he didn't come from a Scientology family, but by the time he met my mom, he was really into Scientology. And then my stepdad also was a really long-term Scientologist. He and my mom dated before she even met my dad, and he'd been in the guardian's office, like, so everybody parental around me were like really hardcore Scientologists.
Yeah, hardcore. Phil says, I knew him pretty well in the early days.
Interesting. Yeah, we should catch up. He's still very active. He still believes very much, and he's an OSA volunteer. He does a lot of online stuff. So maybe he's our troll.
Maybe, probably one of them.
Yeah,
So
he'd
your
know a lot
mom,
more about me.
yeah, you have your son. You decide at that point you are not raising your child in Scientology.
Mhm.
And at what point does your mom and your stepdad become aware of this?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. So I worked for them. We lived out. I moved back to our family land when my son was 3. That was the first time I had been living in the same town as my parents since I was, you know, I guess that's that 9-ish month when I was 14.
Hmm.
Um, and that opened my eyes to a lot of stuff because I would watch their house when they went to flag. I would work with them. So they had a lot of Scientology customers, Narcanon website, all these different things. And so I started to see it again and kind of get embroiled in it again. Stop. And so as I started to see it as my new self, like being a mom and having gone to school a little bit, it didn't make sense to me. Hold on, my dog. What are you talking about? You can't cry. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I'm gonna put my dog out. Hold on.
No problem.
Theo, go out.
If you have questions too, everybody, put question in front or even a question mark just so I can see it. I've got a couple of questions marked that we'll get to, but it'll help me see it more easily in the chat there. So I was asking you, when did your mom find out that you were like, no, I'm done. I'm leaving Scientology.
So I think she knew for a little bit that I wasn't thrilled with it.
Mhm.
The church had a habit of sending KRs about me to my parents, so they were pretty caught up with everything I'd done. But the thing is that I was actually able to talk to my mom about some of my problems with Scientology for the last maybe year and a half of our relationship.
Mm.
Debbie Cook letter, when that came out, my mother received it when she went to trial. Actually, when she went to trial was when I talked to my mom about it for the first time. I was able to, yeah, she wanted to handle me, but she listened to me. And so she knew for the last part. And I think what it was a gradual realization that she was not going to be able to keep her daughter, probably before I figured it out. And so
Yeah.
she slowly started to detach. They moved away. They changed their phone number. Yeah, and it was a whole deal. But yeah, to answer your
So she
question.
just slowly started to disconnect from you.
She did, and I actually started therapy at that time because I was having these really serious panic attacks.
Mhm.
And like thinking about the end a lot, not of myself necessarily, but just like the end of everything. Like everything was really sad and like kind of blown out of proportion, that not blown out of proportion because I was losing everything. Like it was coming down the pipeline and I couldn't stop it from happening. And the only reason it was happening was because I was being more authentic to myself. And I couldn't stop being more authentic to myself. And yet I would say the wrong thing and it would be another nail in my coffin. And I would lie in bed at night thinking like, I'm not going to have this home for very much longer. I don't even know where I'm going to be. I don't know what is going to happen to me. So
And
as you can
home
imagine,
very much longer. Is that because at that time you were living on your family's land?
yes,
Oh,
and working for my parent, working. So it was like I had to work through that. It took me almost, several years to get out from under and like get other resources. And my husband started a business and like, but yeah, I don't know how to explain it other than I was conditioned to know what would happen to me as from when I was a child.
yeah.
You will not be a part of this family if you are not willing to at least play along with Scientology.
Yeah.
Even
To at
even if
least
you just
pretend.
keep your mouth shut, you can have all this. Um, but no, I'm not gonna keep my mouth shut.
Yeah. Did you then end up moving? Did you have to do like, because that, are you still there? Did you have to move off the land as a result of this, or were you able to stay because she left?
No, we were kicked off the land a month earlier. We'd lived there for 10 years, and we were like, fine, we're gonna leave in August. We were ended up getting kicked out, having to leave in July. And
And you had
because
multiple then, or did you have your second child?
I had a 2-year-old at that point.
So they
And
kicked out your family literally kicked you off the land.
yes, yes. And the really sad part is there was a bunch of other non-Scientologists also. Um, but my family really, I mean, my parents in particular, like really painted me in a particular light that there was like this narrative about me that I was just honestly too exhausted to fight. And then I became kind of bitter. Like, if you guys are actually going to believe these lies about me, then F off.
Yeah.
Crazy things. Like, we were involved with the Russian cartel. Um,
Who was saying this?
my stepdad, Jure, just like all
Duray.
kinds of, just like these crazy
That
things
you
that
and your
just,
husband were involved in the Russian cartel?
yeah,
And
because at
that's why
that
you left
time,
Scientology?
well, a lot of it was that time we were involved in the medical cannabis business in Oregon. And so that was this huge point of contention for my stepdad because Narcanon, which is Scientology's drug program, is like this huge one of his clients. So I was very problematic for him. And yeah, it was just this like,
Narcanon was one of his clients? What do you mean?
he does websites. So he
Oh,
would generate content, written content, blog posts, SEO, search engine optimization for Narcanon. Um, yeah, I'm just like I'm just a problematic individual for them.
yeah, for them in that situation. So
Yeah.
you end up moving there. When is the last time that you saw your mom or your mom saw her grandchildren?
Mm, 7-ish in real life, in person, like 7 years ago,
Mhm.
7.5 years ago. Um, yeah, and I was reflecting on this recently. I'm actually was gonna do a live about it, but, how do I explain it? Like, it was worth it for me. It was worth it for my son, like, looking back now, even though no one ever wants to cut a grandparent out of their life, and I don't want to deny my mom that experience,
Mhm.
but that was the right call. So it was actually me ultimately that once they kind of, like, filtered away, I was just like, "No." So with my therapist and a couple other people, I wrote a letter to my mom, and I just said, "You know what? You've clearly disconnected from me. I disconnect back. I disconnect back. You can't break up with me. I break up with you."
Exactly. I say that all the time. I broke up with you, Scientology. I
Yeah.
and then you excommunicated me. Let's be clear about that. I left you. I left you.
Right. I left you first. If that says anything about my attachment style, well, there you go.
I totally get
Yeah,
that too.
yeah.
How do today your kids are getting older,
Mhm.
going with, and maybe this has happened over the years. How do you, or have you explained to your children why they don't see that part of your family and the whole Scientology connection? Is this something that you've been able to talk to them about, or how do you handle that?
So my littlest, he's 10 now. He like overhears probably all the lives and all this stuff, and he kind of gets it, but he never had a loss associated with it because he was just 2. He did have
Yeah.
a loss in the sense that, like, I was actually a really checked out mom for about 7 months there. I was not doing well during that time. I mean, I wasn't like neglectful necessarily to him or anything like that, but I wasn't as present as
Yeah.
say I am now. Um, my older son, he experienced the loss for sure because we lived out there. He did bond with his grandparents,
Mhm.
and there was this whole legacy that was really put on his shoulders about this is your family land. This has been in your family for over 100 years. You're one of the next generation because none of my other family had children. Like, this is going to be your responsibility. You're going to be a steward to the land. Um, and then that was all just sort of taken away from him. And that's fine. He doesn't need to like have this big inheritance. It's just one thing to say a kid has it and then take it away.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
that's
Kick them
crappy.
off the land.
Yeah. For something that he didn't do. He didn't do
Yeah.
it.
Do they ask questions about it? How much do they know about your time in Scientology or their grandparents' involvement?
No, my littlest doesn't care.
That sounds right.
So that's fine. My oldest, he's a big supporter of me, like doing the TikTok, doing the YouTube, writing the book.
Yeah.
So he's gained a lot of understanding about my story through that and through watching the Leah Remini and the Aftermath show that I was on and the other contributors. I think only really recently, now that he's graduated from high school, has he kind of been like, oh yeah, like it could have gone this other way.
Yeah. Yeah. But it didn't. Hopefully
But
that
it
gave him some
didn't.
appreciation because often children don't have a lot of gratitude and appreciation of their parents when they're younger. It's like this could have happened. I remember when my kids were younger at times, not really young, but kind of those more challenging teenage years. And they'd go off about how I was too strict or whatever. And then I would be like, oh, you have no idea.
Right?
You're getting off easy. I found myself parenting in a with kind of a Sea Org mentality
Mm,
where I was more strict with them in that my expectation of them not making mistakes was ridiculous. And that's something that, of course, when I left Scientology and got further away from it, I came to understand because that was just, weren't really allowed to make mistakes. I mean, in Scientology, you do a
yeah.
course. At the end of the course, you take a test. You have to get 100% on it or you go back.
Yep.
And then you restudy those things and then you do it again until you get it
Mhm,
100% correctly. And in
mhm,
Scientology training as part of the indoctrination, your indoctrination to believe that nothing less than perfection is accepted when you're training to be a Scientology auditor, for example. That is how it is promoted and how you're indoctrinated to believe that you need to
right.
be perfect.
Mhm,
And that is such an unrealistic expectation to put on anyone, especially children who are
mhm.
growing up and learn by making freaking mistakes.
Yeah.
That was a missing piece for me till
Mhm,
later, and something that I get so much now, and I think that's what allows me to have more grace with my family, my friends, and mostly myself, that we learn from mistakes.
mhm.
Moving forward now with your family, what has it been like, raising kids, being where you came from with going to boarding school and all that, and not being around your parents and only seeing them on holidays? How do you think, or did that impact your parenting style now?
Yeah, I honestly, so I got my degree. First, I got my associates in early childhood education. So I started that when I was like, yeah, 17. And in there, I learned very quickly that everything I knew about raising a child was wrong, right? It's
Yeah.
Scientology is product, product, product. Normal early childhood education is process over product. Just making mistakes, exploring things sensory, like for no other reason other than the experience of it.
Oh
And
my
so
god,
that
so true.
before I even had my son, I had been a preschool teacher for like 8.5 years. So I had a lot of experience at that point with like normal kid stuff, and a huge community to support me. My husband has a huge family, and they're all within 45 minutes. Young grandparents calling me when our son was first born, the older one, like, when can I have that grandbaby? When can I give me that grandbaby? And my mom didn't do that. And honestly, I was always nervous because my mom would like do things like R factor, which is reality factor. So, a baby's crying and you're like, you're done crying.
Yeah.
That's not an appropriate response to a baby crying.
No, it's not. Did you hear there was Leah Remini shared that when she was at Tom Cruise's wedding in Italy to Katie Holmes, and Suri was an infant, and she went into the bathroom and Suri was on the floor, and there was Tom Cruise's sister and somebody else, and the baby was on the floor crying, and they were just standing there going, Suri, Suri, like basically like, get your act together.
Right.
And this was just a baby.
Right.
But,
So I went to college to learn that that's not how you treat a baby.
Yeah.
It's so weird. That's backwards. I should have learned that. I should have learned that at home. But again, my husband's family was never Scientologists. They are very warm, very loving, very hands-on, and lean way more toward the actual unconditional love that Christianity does speak of. And I had never experienced anything like that before. So they taught me a lot about, just parenting and all that.
Yeah. So it's totally different. And that's evident too. I mean, it's just, you've got these great kids and this family, and it's so different from what you grew up in. And education is so much a part of that. Like you said, going to college and finding out this is actually how you treat a baby, learning those things. There's so much that I'm learning from my kids. Two of my kids have kids. So there's so much from them that I'm learning.
Right.
Ghost back there.
It's my dog. He just let himself in. I'm not going to close it. I won't worry about it. Well, and yeah, that's the thing. You don't know what you don't know. So sometimes, like for me, I was trying to reverse engineer a problem. My brother had unalived himself. I knew all these people who were raised like me. And on one hand, they're in the glossy magazines. They're on the ads of like auditing and Scientology. And yet I'm watching them fall apart. I know the truth about what they're going through. And I was just trying to reverse engineer that. Like, what's happening?
Yeah.
And it came down to early childhood. You can't just R factor a baby.
Yeah, exactly.
You have to do more.
You can't send your kid off at 8 and think that you're not going to have some issues. And looking at the difficulties and the challenges that you had and that your brother had, it's like, at what point do they not look back and go, hey, maybe there's a better way? You did. And the irony here is that you were treated like the criminal, like the black sheep, like the outcast, yet you seem to be the one that kind of really, was seeing at least that there's another option, that maybe there's another way, and you were pushing back on it. It just makes so much sense to me.
Yeah, I became almost more and more comfortable in that black sheep role through these times in my life, right? Where like getting out of the Sea Org or whatever, there are huge repercussions to those where it's like, you're an SP, you're this, you're that. And I guess I just eventually was just like, yeah, I'll take it. I'll take it if it means that nobody else in this family is going to have to deal with it.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Kind of do it from this protective perspective. And ultimately, I mean, you saved your children from Scientology, and you broke that cycle. I mean, just broke that. In fact, I want to pull up, there's a, I think it was in a newsletter, The Auditor, the monthly journal of Scientology. I just want to show people this because this is so, when you look back on this, it's just nuts. First, make sure, if you're not already following Liz Gale and subscribed, here is her channel. You can find her right there. Liz Gale, or just search Liz Gale. I find you every time I pull you up that way.
Liz Gale Scientology, and boom, there I go.
Boom, you got it. Okay, so let's see. Oh, I'm just remembering now too. I told people that I was going to change. I was going to do, I don't want to change it now, but that I was going to do this more to do
Whoa.
interviews. Yeah, I know.
Whoa.
It feels very odd right now. I will
Spare
do it in
me.
my next one. I
Spare
totally
me.
forgot. Yeah. Totally forgot, you guys. I completely meant to do that. Habit, habit, habit. Okay, so I'm going to pull this up so people can see here and we can kind of just give them a little taste. Are any of your family in this one?
On page 5, my grandma, I think my grandma and my grandpa.
That's what
They're
I
just listed as names. There's not a picture.
yeah.
Go down a little bit. Oh, is it page 5? It's the St. Hill. Yep. Okay, go back up a little. I don't know how to explain this to you, but that says right there, recent St. Hill
Yeah,
special briefing course graduation, and Barbara Chandler is the second name. That's my
right
grandma.
there.
She's
Wow.
she's also listed as an editor on the very first versions of the technical dictionary. The story I was always told was that she actually started the technical dictionary out on our ranch on index
Wow.
cards, wrote L. Ron Hubbard, and coordinated with. They had like another little dictionary, but like. So this what we're looking at is from 1968.
1968, the miracle of
Mhm.
standard tech.
And the
Or
St. Hill briefing course isn't offered anymore, but that at the time was literally you learned everything from everything in Scientology, like from the conception to that date. So all the lectures that L. Ron Hubbard did in order. So essentially, she was an expert at that time in
wow.
Scientology.
I
Yeah.
noticed too in this newsletter, security checks abolished.
Mm.
The practice of security checking from security checklists like the Joburg has been abolished. I mean, obviously it was not abolished. They continued doing it.
Yeah, I find things like that to be proof that L. Ron Hubbard knew exactly what he was doing, and he got pushed back very early in the early days. But just like fair game, there's a letter that says fair game is canceled. Well, it didn't stick, so it's BS.
Wow. It's so true. Over and over and over again, Scientology goes, "Oh, no, we don't do that anymore. That was canceled."
Yeah,
Yeah, you do.
right.
I mean, looking at that, when I saw that, I was like, "Oh my gosh," even back in the '60s, he was saying the same thing. "Oh,
Yeah,
this is canceled. We're not doing it." And then
yeah,
they're
we don't do
still
that anymore.
completely doing it.
Right.
Like, since when?
Meanwhile, I was born however many years later, and I have been security checked a million times. My mother did before I went to Delphi, just as a standard procedure, did the children's security check on me from her. She did it in our home office.
Yeah,
So,
that must have sucked having
so
a
if you
mom
wonder
who was
why
a
I'm so
chief auditor.
messy, no, just kidding. I'll own it. It's my mess now.
It's a beautiful mess. We're
Right.
all just messes figuring it out. That's the
Yeah.
thing. The lie is that everybody else has their stuff together. No, they don't.
Well, and the more somebody tries to convince me that they have all the answers, the more these days that my culty flag just flies.
Oh, so
Because
no.
I'm like, I'm a grown up now. It's been demystified. Nobody knows what they're doing.
Yeah,
I'm sure of
exactly.
it.
We know now.
Yeah.
Amy had a question about your time at boarding school. Was there assistance for the child at the school? My daughter needed help with putting clothes together and so many other things at that age. Like, did you just pick your own clothes and
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I did my own laundry, picked up my own clothes. I mean, you're sent to boarding school. Like my mom would go shopping with me, and then we would go to school, and you just have what clothes you have. But yeah, this about sums it up for me. So when I was 8 years old, so they make their own bread there, and it's really, really good, white French bread. And I think for the first week to 2 weeks, that's all I ate was bread. And I had never been constipated before. I'm like 8 years old. I'm crying. My stomach hurts so bad. I have no idea what's happening to me. I have no parents there. And it was this very awkward and like embarrassing thing. Um, but that's where I was at. I was 8 years old. I didn't know the basic thing that you can't eat white bread for 3 meals a day for a week.
I think,
So
yeah, most 8-year-olds would not know that, but the fact that nobody's watching, nobody's keeping an eye, who's making sure I think about my kids at 8, and if I left them to their own devices,
oh, yeah.
they'd show up places naked
I
or,
know.
or with
I know.
dirty
Yeah.
underwear. There's
Well, and
just
I
so
don't think you
many.
can send an 8-year-old, honestly, to that school now. Like, this was kind of there were so many sort of like situational back deal, like, oh, this kid, they really need Scientology help. They really need, to go there. Like, we'll figure it out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Not
so
good.
stupid.
Not good.
Uh, let's see. Windy City Thetan Watch. I always imagined demo kits having many small parts. Was there a penalty if you lost any of the bits? And if for those that don't know, in Scientology, when you're studying something, you use a demo kit, which is basically like a bowl with a bunch of miscellaneous anything in it. And you
Mhm.
would use the parts, you would move them around to show that concept. You would demonstrate a
Mhm.
concept in Scientology using this demo kit.
I have my demo kit from Delphi. I
Did
do.
everybody have the same kind of demo kit?
No, you could have what that was like one of the small joys. Honestly, that was one of the small joys is that your demo kit could be anything. You just had to have it in its own little box. So they had a demo kit on the table that would just have like boring, like a pebbles or little blocks or like those little bears, pen caps, whatever. But you could have your own. So I always liked little things. So they were like my little things. And so I
Yeah,
always liked doing demos with them because it was almost like playing.
yeah. Oh, yeah, exactly. I felt that
Even if
way
I wasn't
too.
allowed to play, I was doing a
Yeah, I
demo.
love to do demos because you get to move things around and make
Mhm.
them talk to each other.
Yeah, yeah.
Not so much as an adult, but as a kid. Let's
Mm.
see. Fuzzy Pink Handcuffs is asking, did your mom get in trouble for causing your brother's engrams? You had talked about earlier how if a child is overstimulated because of these engrams, that it's better they're not around the mother. Was there a consequence to your mom because of that?
I have no response for that. I can only say that during the earlier times of my life and my brother's life, my mother was voraciously making progress up the bridge. I would consider her to have been a professional Scientologist. My father was a business owner, was making quite a bit of money, and she was doing Scientology. In fact, I was so young that I don't remember all of it, but somebody messaged me on TikTok and they said, I met your mom on the ship in like 1983. She had already been there for a year. I
Whoa.
was like, wait, what? So the ship is like the only place in Scientology. It's a cruise ship. It's the only place you can do the highest levels of Scientology, top secret. Um, so yeah, she was super duper into it.
Wow. Blow Drill says, did you have any security checks when you were at Delphi? How did they deal with out ethics?
Yeah, I did not have a security check on the Delphi premises. At one point when I was 12, I was acting out. I kissed a boy, and then
Did you like it?
I liked it probably a little too much. They were like, girl. Um, so at that point, I actually got suspended too, and I had to go to Flag to do my objectives. And I had this whole program about if I did my objectives and this whole ethics handling, they would allow me to come back. Meanwhile, at Delphi, they used OWs, so writing up your crimes in a very specific way as laid out by L. Ron Hubbard. Instead of there's no detention, as most people would think if you could get in trouble, you go to detention. There's ethics. There's the ethics department at Delphi. So that's your behavior modification, your behavioral stuff. And then also you can be assigned MEST work, which is matter, energy, space, and time, like labor.
Mhm.
So in order to make up the damage for some of my misbehaviors, I would have to flow my energy to the school and do scullery, landscaping,
So
etc.
what is scullery landscaping?
Those are two different things. Scullery is the dishes in the dining hall,
Oh,
and then
scullery.
landscaping. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I did scullery in the Sea Org then.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know. I mean, I probably being so young. I mean, I probably wasn't good for much else as far as mess work goes. And I was, 80-pound, tiny little big mouthed problematic girl. Just Give her a hose and a bunch of dishes.
Cricket Cinema is asking, how did your study experience in Scientology impact your love of learning or methods of learning?
Mm. I had to learn from my peers how to take notes and how to study for um regular school stuff. I really didn't understand. I was very hyper focused on like learning everything. Everything. I had to know everything.
You had to clear every word that you didn't.
Yeah. I also did the Key to Life course, which in Scientology is this course where you learn every definition of every punctuation and every small word in the English language. So I learned like 20 definitions of the word of,
Mm,
like 16 definitions for the word to the point where you are actually making these examples, the differentiations between the uses of the word of in clay, right? Like super
yeah,
hardcore. Um, I don't know if that attributed to I'm a good writer. I
yeah.
don't know. I
You
don't know if
know,
that's because of that. I don't know.
I did the Key to Life too,
Okay.
and I definitely attributed it because I'd done work as a columnist,
Okay.
and I was like, well, I mean, I don't know how else to explain it, because I dropped out of school when I was 15.
Right.
But often in Scientology, they'll take you and put you through something like the Key to Life, or
Mhm.
have you do things their way so that you can completely duplicate and understand an order so that you can execute it. It's
Right.
not to help you
Right.
be a better student in your life as you go off. It was so that we were better little robots and able
Mhm.
to understand, duplicate, and execute. And then if you were writing orders, that you could write them so they were clear and
Mhm.
somebody could understand and execute, those orders. It's so all centered around Scientology. And there's also other ways I feel like we could have gotten those same skills without doing that dang Key to Life course that was so long. Oh my gosh,
It was
it
so
was
long.
labor. I think it
Mhm.
took, I don't even know how long I was on it. I wasn't on it full time, but to finish it, I was. It was
Mhm.
just months and months. Some people
Mhm.
were on that for years.
I was on it for a really long time. My saving grace, honestly, was that I did it at CC Int, and I was paired with this woman who I've honestly tried to find so many times. Her name was Hilda Vandermeulen, and she was like a beauty queen from, like, I want to say the Netherlands, some Northern European, and an actress. And we twinned together. So every day we showed up, we hung, and we laughed. We got in so much trouble for laughing. We were in glee. We had a muse. Anyway, these are all Scientology ways but she made it, I don't know. She made it bearable,
Yeah, that's good. I think
and
we've
she
all
cut me some slack.
that's good.
Yeah.
That's nice. Vanessa says, Liz, did you know Megan or Allison Miller from your Delphi years?
I don't think that the last name Miller sounds familiar. It'll come to me later.
Yeah. Jane's asking, do
Mhm.
your kids know they were destined to go into the cult of Scientology, and how do they feel about that?
My older one does, and I think it was maybe like 4 months ago, I got a text that was like, "Hey, thanks, bruh." So so I'll take it. He was like, "Yeah, he was watching something." He was like, "Yeah, that's slavery." "Oh, yeah. Thanks for getting me out of that. Thanks, bruh."
Yeah.
"You got it, bruh."
Take it. You got to take it.
Mhm.
Escaping the cultiverse. Liz, do you remember Alex Price and her sister in Delphi? Can't
Yes,
remember her sister's
absolutely.
name.
I can't remember her sister's name either. Alex, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that Alex Price was a Canadian who went on to win some sort of like Canada's Got Talent. And yeah, she's like a singer, Canadian. I don't know if she is anymore, but yeah, I remember her.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
Mhm.
Stacy says, with all of that word clearing, were you disappointed to find out that some definitions of some words were BS made up by LRH?
Is that for me?
Yeah.
No, I was freaking relieved. I don't know when I finally realized the spell of language. Language is so core, so fundamental for humans. It's fascinating to me. Like just the language you speak affects your brain and like how you even think, because there's words for certain things in certain languages that are expressed differently. And so I was actually really relieved to find out that he convoluted terms and that I could take them back, like that there was some concreteness to them. And actually, one of my biggest skills, I think, is explaining Scientology terms in regular words.
Yeah. No, I've seen you do it. I would
I
agree.
strive to do that.
Blow
Oh,
drill.
blow drill.
Did you know Rusty Gill when you were at Delphi?
Yes, and I'm gonna only say, I'm not gonna say what I'm really thinking here. Rusty Gill, because I want to punch him.
Is he related to Dylan?
Yes, that's Dylan's father, and he's an art teacher, and he's this beloved art teacher there, and he does the ceramics and stuff, and you would never know. I would assume most people don't know that he has abandoned his son and his grandsons, and it's gross. So yeah, I knew him.
Dylan wants to know if you have any stories about him.
I mean, the art room was right next to the RO water. So Delphi, this school has really, really gross well water, and there's only one place where you can fill up your water bottle or something like that, and it's right next to art. And he's really kind to all the students. It's such a cognitive dissonance and so like really gross to me, because he was so kind and warm and like artistic and free thinking. And Delphi has a very, very good art program. Really good artists come out of there. And I think that's largely because of him. But like all things in Scientology, it's like you have this happy-go-lucky guy with one daughter or two daughters that he had at the school that were like cute and bubbly and perfect. Meanwhile, nobody knew that he had this other kid who he just abandoned. And I don't know if you guys know Dylan's story. I don't want to like blow his cover, but he went through hell.
Yeah. Yeah.
Meanwhile,
he shared it. So, I
yeah.
mean, Will, you guys know him in the chat. He's got a great and amazing story of growing up and what happened with his family. I had him on the channel, I think some months ago. So if you go to my live videos and you just scroll back to January or so, wasn't it like January or so, Dylan? Maybe it was February, where I got to learn more about him and what led to him joining the Sea organization. And you're right, his dad was an art teacher at Delphi, where you were. It's so interesting how we're all connected together in ways.
Yeah. Well, and his dad does art shows at the like local farmers market just a couple towns over. And I mean, I've told Dylan any day you want me to send me over there, I'll risk a little verbal assault charges for you.
Let's do it when I go visit you.
Okay.
Let's just do it.
I honestly though, and this is messed up, sorry Dylan, but like I honestly do think that your kids and are better off without that tie and that pressure. Screw them. That's what I think.
Carol says, how did you feel when you seen your mom on video a while ago and your hair looks great?
Thank you for the hair compliment. It made me sick to my stomach. It broke my heart. So,
and that was a video that someone did on YouTube, for people who don't know, where somebody was protesting Scientology in Seattle, I think at the Seattle org, and out walks your mom.
Yeah, at this last New Year's. And my mom was the person, I guess, tasked with like greeting the protesters. Now, this wasn't regular protesters. These aren't the protesters that we think about. This was a different protest that was trying to get Scientology reformed back to its good old days, right? So it's like a whole other battle. But yeah, my mom was the person who went out there to greet. And it made me sick. It made my mind spin. Like, why is she doing this? Why is she doing this now? What's happening? Is she in trouble because I'm speaking out more, or like, yeah. So that's what I felt. That's what I thought. I don't have anything figured out about it.
Yeah.
So.
And then Blow Drill says, no, please don't.
I won't. I just talk a big talk.
I still might.
I might. I might.
I don't know. You're going to have to convince us, Dylan, because right now I'm like, oh yeah, let's go. Let's do it.
I mean, at what point though, like when it came to my mom, for example, like, how do I explain this? Like, it would kill her. I truly believe that if she had to break ties with Scientology and like really look at what Scientology was, I don't think she would survive. She spent her whole life in this, and it would bring to light so many tragedies and have to rewrite and relook and re-sift through. I mean, doing it in my 20s was so incredibly painful. I don't wish that on anybody. And so I'm really not in the business of actually trying to convince old timers anymore, or like, even like going to Dylan's dad and just saying, you stupid idiot, you're missing out on this amazing man. What's
Mhm.
wrong with you?
Absolutely. Dylan says, if I saw him, all I would want to do is hug him for my inner kid that needed them.
Don't make me cry today, Dylan. Don't make
Okay,
me
fine,
cry.
Dylan. We will go hug your dad. We will track him
Fine.
down at this farmer's market and say, this is from your son. Just give him a hug and keep our mouth shut.
I get that feeling though. I don't want anybody coming after my mom either.
Yeah. No,
I
I
get it.
totally get that. I totally get that.
But you asked. You asked.
You change your mind, Dylan. We got you.
Yeah. No little thug in my life.
Anyone else have Scientology parents you'd like us to go confront? Probably not the greatest idea. I don't know. I
Yeah.
think it's just I'm obviously in a mood.
Yeah, right.
Right now, I'm like, "Oh, let's do it." And,
Yeah.
Norman, good point. It's so much harder for old timers to blow. That's
Mhm.
so true. I would agree with that completely.
Mhm.
I really would. It is more difficult. Escaping the Cultiverse says, "My brother-in-law is in his 70s, and I don't think he would survive now without Scientology."
Yeah, and that's gotta be her call, right? Like, I don't wanna spend my time and energy trying to break her, fracture her worldview.
Yeah.
If she has a seed or she has something that she needs to do in that regard and she showed up on my doorstep, I would totally be there for her, but I'm not trying to get anybody to think how I think.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I get that. I totally get that. It is something that I think we all work through when it comes to, multi-generational families in Scientology.
Mhm,
And I think it's similar to families where there was maybe generational abuse or generational trauma.
mhm,
Is part of breaking that cycle is not behaving in the same way. It's
right,
not going down that negative route, not playing gotcha, not trying to just rub the person's face in it.
right.
And that is something I know in my experience, I find that I get to that point, but then sometimes I'll flip and I'm like, oh, I just want to let you have it right now. And not even screaming or yelling, but just and for me, it more happens when it's friends of mine, when it's their family or
Right.
someone in their lives, then I get like, I just want to go confront that person.
Mhm.
For some reason, when it's people who maybe in my life or in my family at times who harmed me in regard to Scientology, I don't feel so. I don't know why that is. I just have an easier time just like, all right, well, I'm going to let that go. I'm going to forgive you for that,
Mhm.
whether you know it or not, because I need to let it go.
Yeah.
I find that harder to do with I mean, you've got some family members I would love to go at, and we have talked about
Mhm.
that, and still on the table, my friend.
Well, that particular family member is always gonna be on the table. If I catch her when she's 90, we're still having words. She
Yeah,
doesn't get a pass like
no,
my mom.
no, and maybe, you know what, hopefully, maybe even she leaves Scientology, but there's still some accountability there, and I
Mhm,
think that's the thing. It's like,
mhm,
"Hey, part of your healing is taking responsibility for the damage that you caused." It's
mhm.
even it's just a part of it. Not everybody gets there, but,
Yeah.
yeah, we won't talk about her too much, or I'll just get pissed off.
No, I feel you. It's interesting though, I can see in some other people in my family who have ended up staying or still are under the radar, how shame it was really used to, control those people,
Yeah,
and not that I don't experience shame, but at some point I'm like, "Well, if I'm such a POS, then deal with it. I don't know. Sorry."
yeah,
I'm
okay.
Yeah, I don't try. I'm just like, "Whatever." So, I don't know, it's different.
Yeah, no, I get that. Well, Liz, I cannot thank you for enough for coming on and doing this. It's always so much fun to chat with you,
Too.
and I am going to get in fact, I still is your book on Audible?
No, not yet. I will get there. I will get there, guys.
Do you think you would do your own Audible?
Yeah.
I feel like you would rock it.
Yeah, I just need to get the, like, technical aspect of it figured out, but I'm working on my next book. I've got a couple other things that I in the works, so the Audible is keeps getting pushed down my list. Sorry,
Yeah.
guys.
And here's where you can find Liz so that you can stay up to date on what she's
Mhm,
doing, on the new book, on
mhm,
all kinds of things on her channel, Liz Gale
mhm,
Gale. But you can just pop in Liz Gale too and find her.
mhm. And if
Liz,
you're on TikTok, then definitely follow me there because I do tons of content over there that's not on YouTube, will never be on YouTube. Um, so there's that, FYI.
oh my goodness, that's right. I forget about that. You're like the queen of TikTok over there. I watch it. I just get confused. I swear I'm a Gen X with boomer tendencies sometimes. It just all these like when they do live streams on TikTok and there's all
Yeah.
these things popping up, I'm like, "Oh, I just cannot. I
I have
cannot."
the attention span of a goldfish, so it works for me.
But I love watching your TikTok. Like I love the videos you do and you do some really good ones in regard to like Scientology and the things you share and you do it in a way that I watch and I'm like I'm just like glued to it. Tell me more. Even though I already some of it I know, it's just I love the way that you do it. I enjoy watching you as a content creator. Like even if I
Yeah.
didn't know you when we weren't friends, I could see that you would be somebody that I would be watching your channel and wanting to know more. So I'm so happy that you're back. You're back here creating content, that you're working on another book. And I think we're all excited to be able to. And there's a link too in the chat here
Thanks,
where you can
Candy.
find Liz's book, Confessions of an Ex-Scientologist
Mhm,
Pothead, on Amazon, which you can
mhm.
just plug that into Amazon as well and see all the cool thing that she's doing. Mary says, Natalie, I'm the same Gen X, but no TikTok or Snap.
Yeah, I've heard that a lot, and then a lot of people wanted me to put my TikToks over on YouTube, but I think there's some, like, I'll get dinged for that. So,
Yep, that's true, actually. They
mhm.
don't like that. I know YouTube
Yeah.
doesn't like that. They want that original content. That makes a lot of
Mhm.
sense.
Yeah.
All right, Liz. Well, I'm so glad you're here. We will talk again soon.
Yep.
Everybody, thank you so much for being here. Hit that like, hit that subscribe, and get out there and have an amazing cult free day.
Yep. Bye, everybody.